Okay, so today we're talking about like different ways to access cells. So go ahead and get this census.xlsm file downloaded and go ahead and bring it up, get it open, and then just someone tell me something about this data. I mean, you're looking at this data. Suppose that your supervisor has given you this file and says to you, Smithers, make sense of this for me. And you're just kind of picking it up. You don't have really much to look at. There's no other documentation than what's here. What is this data? What can you tell me about it? Say something about this data. Go ahead. Oh, okay, so it's census data. We kind of get a little clue from the title that it's census data. So what you're saying is that this first column is identifying the places that some of this other information is about. Okay, so what else do we got? What does this number mean right here? M, let's go to M4. What does M4 mean? And M looks pretty interesting because like M1 actually says sex. So that must be, there's going to be something interesting here. What is it? Go ahead. Okay, so you're conjecturing here. You're looking at that and you're saying it's right around 50%. If I look down that column, these are all 50%, right around 50%. So you're conjecturing this is probably percentage that's men or percentage that's female or something. But how could you come up with the authoritative answer for what that is? It's right here in the book. There's another sheet called data dictionary. So if we go look at this data dictionary, what is that going to tell us? What is that thing called? This is sex 255208. Sex 255208. So resident population total females percent. So it's the percentage of the population that's female. And that's what that is. So so now I think we've figured this out, is that down here, this is going to be the particular region that we have the data about, and then each of these are going to be variables. And so this M is the percentage of the population that's female. And so if I look at an intersection here, this is going to be for, let's look at M5. So M is the percentage of the population that's female, but M5 is the percentage of the population that's female. What? Like this whole column is the percentage of population that's female, but what is M5? Yeah. And what is the name of that place? Yeah, so here in the county names, we've got like 1003 is Baldwin, Alabama. Okay. So now I think this kind of gets us connected to the data. So we've got all these different variables. We know the variable names by looking at the data dictionary. And now we know the place names by looking over in the county name sheet. This is the data that I downloaded from the Census Bureau probably 15 years ago now. But and the only thing that I've done to that's different is that I made this column here that combines both the county and the state, or if it's just the state, like 1000 is for all the state of Alabama, then that is the state, or for all of the United States. So presumably, if we look at some of the absolute numbers for that, where ANSI is 0, we're going to see some pretty big numbers because that's like the whole United States. Yeah, so if we're looking at, this must be an absolute population because this is 30 million versus, what is that, 4 million in Alabama? For the state of Alabama, and then for individual counties. So what would you say? Is this data easy to work with? If you're say you're trying to compare a couple of counties to each other, easy to work with or difficult to work with in the format that it's in right now? Yeah, it's not especially easy to work with. And so my goal today is, we're learning a little bit about referring to ranges, different ways we can refer to ranges. But my goal today is to kind of build a tool that would allow us to compare counties, kind of pick a county, compare it to some other county, and be able to have that be a pretty useful tool. And I think we can do that without too much trouble. So I think let's start this. Let's start by just copying this data dictionary sheet. So we just copy and paste that sheet, or click and drag. How do we do that? Click and drag. Do a control click and drag. We'll duplicate that sheet. And then I'm just going to call this sheet, I'm going to call this compare. And I'm going to get rid of everything on here except columns A and B. But I'll leave the data from A and B where they are. So I'm going to use this as the sheet to say, let's go ahead and pull data in from, pick a county, pull the data in, pick another county, pull the data in, pick another county, pull the data in, and have it bring the data right here next to the label so I can see maybe I'll put the column, the county names at the top of the column. I'll put the labels are already here. I'll just line the data up to match with those labels, and then I'll be able to look. I'll have the full names of the variables, be able to see the county that they're from, and it'll be in good shape. So how then should we start off by saying, let the user pick a county? How do we want the user to tell us which county they want to see the data for? Any thoughts on how we might do that? So ultimately, we want someone to pick a county. How could they do it? One option would be they could type in the ANSI number for that county. Another one would be they could type in the name of that county. These are both not very pleasant approaches to identify a county. They both work, but they're not very good. So it would be a better way to allow users to identify the county that they want us to work with. Go ahead. Okay, so a drop-down box, I like the idea of a drop-down box because now anytime you've got the user typing something in, they're going to type it in wrong. But if they got a drop-down box, they might pick it wrong, but at least there'll be a valid value that they pick. So I like that. There was another comment in the back, maybe it was the same thing. Or other option would just be to be in the data, maybe just come over, maybe the way that you would pick it is to come over here to the county names and then be right here and say, that's the one that we want. So let's go ahead and I think either of those would be better than typing it in from scratch. But let's go ahead and make a drop-down box right here. In fact, I'm not sure. I don't even think I want column A. I'm just going to go to column. I'm going to delete column A. So I've got column A just has my variable names in them. There's a couple of different ways that we can do a drop-down box. What's the way that you know how to do a drop-down box? A drop-down list. That's called data validation. So we can do it with data validation. And so we could just build a data validation here in this cell. So you would pick the value that you want. Alternatively, on the developer tab, under these tools, we can use this kind of drop-down box, which is a different way to do it. Tell me how many of you are already familiar with data validation? Say, you know what, I could make a drop-down list of data validation. Looks like, really a small proportion of us. How many of you are saying, I've never used data validation? A lot of folks are not turning out to the polls today, I can see. Voter apathy has just run rampant in this country. So let's go ahead and take this way that I'm sure that most of you haven't done that, and that is to be able to use this form control. The truth is either one would work for us, and it didn't really matter to me which way we do it. Why don't we go ahead and do this one? So it turns out that we are going to see how to build complex dialog boxes that kind of pop up a new window that have lots of different kind of controls to be able to figure out how we're going to let the user choose from a drop-down menu, or like option buttons, or like a spinner that lets them kind of click a button to move a value up and down. Because we can put those same things like directly onto the worksheet, and that's what we're going to do right here. So let's go ahead on the developer tab under this insert menu. We're going to choose this tool here called the combo box control. And I'm just going to select that, and then I will click and drag to put that combo box right here, kind of around A1. And then we're just going to configure this combo box to pull the values in that we want to pull in. So I'm going to right click it and choose format control. The input range says, hey, where do you want to get the values that show in this list? Well, that's going to be easy. I'm just going to come to county names. And that's the whole reason that I put these together in one value. So we could just select this column of data. And to do that right, yeah, D1 to D3196. And so the input range says, where do you want to get the values to show in the list? And now the next one here is the cell link. This says, where do you want to indicate which one the user has chosen? And I'm going to do that right here in A1 on my compare sheet. I'll just click on that cell. I could type in A1 or click on it. And drop down lines 8, that's fine. Ooh, 3D shading. Fancy. Turn off 3D shading. And we'll say okay. So now if I drop down this list, I can see that I've got that list to choose from. And when I select it, it puts a number that's right there in that cell. It's the whole state of Washington. There's Adams County, Washington, 3005, etc. What is that number, by the way? Washington might be a little harder to figure out. Let's come up here to something like state of Alabama. So I choose state of Alabama and it puts a 2 there. What does that 2 mean? Go ahead. It's really tempting to say it's the row that it's on. Let's go take a look and see if that's a hypothesis. Let's verify that hypothesis. So Alabama State shows 2. Let's go see if that's on row 2. County names. And Alabama is here. We're not really testing that hypothesis. And that it turns out that's not. It's not the row number it comes from. It is the number that it is in the dropdown. Now it happens because we don't have a header row here. That's the same thing. So 0 is the first entry 1, but it's not tying back to the row that it came from. It's tying to the what entry it is in the dropdown box. Okay, so I think that's done a pretty good job of at least allowing us to pick a particular, to choose a particular unit, whether it's the state of Alabama or a particular county. I'm just going to move this up just a bit, I think. There we go. I might even cover over the 2 with it. Don't really want the user even thinking about that 2. I think they might type something else in there or whatever. So we'll just kind of hide it with the drop down. So, and this is the thing that really that's fundamentally different, at least in appearance, between using a control and using data validation. If I did data validation, it would just be built onto that particular cell. But this is a control that floats kind of on top of the worksheet. It doesn't have to be in a cell. It can kind of span multiple cells because it just kind of fits over the top. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to do something to make this code like execute, like when the user chooses. Because when the user chooses a state, I'd like to bring in all the data for that state. Just immediately bring in that data. So let's start off by building a sub procedure that will bring in the data. So I'm going to come to my VBA code. I don't have any module in here, so I'm going to insert a module. And let's make a sub procedure here called choose county. This is mostly county level data. We have some other summary units, but choose county. And for right now, let me just kind of get this connected up to that combo box. I'm just going to do a debug.print of county chosen. And then I'm just going to put the value of A1. So range, what have I done? County chosen, comma, range A1. Come back. Where did you go? Okay. So now if I run this, it's just gonna print whatever value is in A1. But what I want to do is I want to connect up this control to run this subprocedure when the user makes a selection. So I'm going to right click this and choose assign macro. I don't have that many to choose from. Choose county is the one that I have there. And so I'll say okay. So now when I click off of that and come back and choose a different one, it's showing me the one that we have chosen there. So it's showing me the number for the one that's chosen. It's pretty good. Questions here? So now we just actually have to make that go and get the data. So what do I want to plug in here? In fact, why don't we start off by just getting the name. Let's put the name of the state here in B1 and the county in B2 when we choose that. So we've got the row number that we're interested here. And so let's just go ahead and plug that in. So here's one way to refer to a particular cell. And in fact, I think I'm going to make sure that we're referring to this to the right sheet. So we've done this before, but it's good to have a little more practice at this. Let me dim S as a worksheet. And let's set S equal to worksheets. I'm looking for the sheet named compare. Okay, so now I'm just going to say S dot range. And then in quotes inside the parentheses for the range method, I'm just going to give it the address that I'm interested in, and that's going to be B1. We're going to set the value of that. Well, this is, I think we've seen this a couple of times. The range method just allows us to give it an address for a range or a single cell range in the way that we're used to thinking of it in terms of Excel. So we want to be a multi-cell range like B1 colon B5 or something. But this is a single cell does it this way. And we're going to set that equal to, now we want to refer to the sheet that has my data on it. Now, if I'm looking at this data sheet here, I can see that, zoom in here. I can see that over here in my Project Explorer, it says data set on the tab, but it actually has a name. The sheet has a name, other than like sheet 1. And so it's, actually I'm going for counties. So my county name sheet says county names on the tab, but it's just called counties as the underlying object name. So I should be able to use that to refer to the sheet. So counties dot, another way to refer to a cell, we've done this a few times as well, and that is to use the cells method. The cells method, I supply a row and a column. Well, the row that I'm interested in is, it's what's in range A1 on my compare sheet. So let's just make a variable for that. Dim, so I'm keeping track of the row that we're interested in. So I'll probably name this variable Henry David. Henry David, you get it? Henry David, the row. Yeah. Let's just call it, yeah. Not that many good jokes here, folks. You got to take what you can get. I'm just going to call it row. And we'll make that a long integer. Just again, my policy is if I'm referring to a row, make it a long integer, so you never know how the problem might grow. So going to be whatever is here in range A1. I'm printing that off here, but let me go ahead and give the row that value. So let me say row equals S dot range A1. fact, let me show you a different way to refer to a range. This one's really weird. I call it weird because I didn't learn about it until after I'd been programming in VBA for decades, and so it seems strange to me. But if you just want to refer to one like a fixed cell directly in code, in square brackets, like without quotes or anything, you just put the name of the cell, like the cell address. And we're after the value of that. VALU. I guess I'm really not interested in printing that off anymore. So this is just another syntax for referring to a particular cell. Now, you might say, well, why would you do that when you have range here? And the answer is, with range, I can have another variable, another expression can evaluate to figure out what this string argument is supposed to be. But this one, it really is just a fixed reference to that cell. And I know of no way to make this dynamic. So this is, hey, I'm referring to a particular cell by its address. It's always going to be that cell. And so that should give me the row that's there. So when I want to pull in the name of the state into B1, then I will come here and choose what row do I want? I want the row called row. And what column do I want? I don't remember. You come back to my county names, and the state is in column 3. And so here I'll put a 3, and we're after the value of that. Let's do this. So for this one, I think I'm going to refer to B2. I'm going to do that with this notation here, just so we can kind of get a few different examples here. So this is going to be B2. And that's going to be from the same place, but instead of looking at column 2, I'm going to look at column B. Just to point out that for the cells method, you can specify either the number of the column, or you can have the name of the column here as well. And I'm going to do something different up here. So I've got this example using the square brackets down here. I'm going to show you a different way of using cells. So we're used to supplying a row and a column, but I can supply just like a particular like cell number. Like this is cell number 1. And that would be like on this sheet right here. That's the first cell on the sheet. What's the second cell? Do you think it's B1 or A2? It's going to be B1. So the way these are numbered is they go right across the column. So let's just kind of poke at that for just a second. So cells 1, let's ask for the address. And let's print the address. That's A1. Cell 2 is B1. What's the last column number? I can never remember. So if I ask for that cell, it should be this one, XFD1. But if I go one more on that, one past that, what's it going to be? Yeah, A2. So it just numbers them all the way across. And then like the 16,385th cell is A2. It's not so useful when you're referring to like the whole sheet, but when you have a smaller range that you're dealing with, it can be quite helpful. In fact, when we get to one of our projects, we'll use that to simplify the problem significantly. But the point here is that you can refer to, take the value of that. You can refer to a cell just by a single number as well. And they're just numbered 1 through however many cells there are in the range. Okay, now when I run this, it should be pulling in now the state and the county. So let's just see if it works. We come back to my compare sheet, and I will choose a particular one here. So we'll choose Baldwin County. Looks great. It's got the Alabama there. It's got the Baldwin there. I choose Butler. We got Butler. If I go off of Alabama, then we can find Sheridan, Nebraska. I guess that's Nebraska. Is that Nebraska? I don't know. Yeah, Boone. That sounds like Nebraska. Okay. Now we've got the names of we've got the names there. Now we want to bring in the data that corresponds to all these variables. Oh boy. How am I going to do it? Any thoughts? You go back to Baldwin County because it's a little easier to find on the data sheet. We want to bring in the code that goes with that, population estimate, all the other data. I just want to lay it in right here. How would you do it if you had to do it by hand? Where is the data for Baldwin County? I'm come to my data set. Where's the data for Baldwin County? It's row 5, because 1,000 is Alabama. This is some county I can't pronounce. That's why we're using Baldwin County in row 5. So this is the data that I need. If you're doing it by hand, how would you do it? You guys are like pretty good with Excel. How would you do it? So you might say, hey, let's just look it up. So what you might say is, we come over here on my compare sheet, we could just put a function in here that says, take the value, let's see, you're going to look it up. Somehow we're going to have to get that code, because to do like an X lookup or a V lookup, it would be, I got to know the code that we're looking for. So we got to get that somehow. But once I've got that, I could put like a VLOOKUP function here, a different one here, a different one here that would just pull different columns. That would work. That's way more work than I want to do. What's the easier way? I just want this to be just the values. I just want to put the values here. Go ahead. Paste transpose. Yeah. So I say, I'll just come over here and copy it. Get that set of data and then just do a copy and paste, but tell it to paste transpose. So we can record ourselves doing that and take a look at it. Why don't we just go ahead and do that? So it'd be a good little exercise for us to record something that we're not quite sure how to do. So I'm going to just come back to my compare sheet and I'm going to start recording. Developer, record macro. Macro 1's a great name for it. And I'm just going to go get the data for Baldwin County. So data set, come over here and choose A5, Control Shift right arrow, should highlight that whole range of cells. Copy that, come back to my compare sheet, go on to B3, right click and do a paste transpose. And stop recording. Now that will have made a new module, because whenever you start recording, it's going to make a new module to hold all the recorded stuff. So I'll look here and just going to take a look at what it recorded. So you can see that we selected A5 and then, wow, this one's kind of interesting. This is how it recorded selecting that whole set of data. I'm going to take that. I'm going to work with that for just a minute. So I'm going to print that. Instead of selecting it, I'm going to print the address. And instead of selection, I'm going to tell it specifically the cell that I'm after. So in this case, let me just come in here and say cells, row number 5, column number 1. And let's just kind of look at this. There's 2 arguments here. A little bit strange. So normally when we've used range in the past, we've just given it a string argument that says we're talking about range A1 or a multi-cell range. But this version of range takes 2 arguments. It takes a starting cell, and then it takes an ending cell. This one that it gave me is really kind of neat. I'm going to cut that out for just a second. and I'm going to hard code in an ending cell here. So a different cell, same row, 5, different column, we'll give it 10. And that is going to say, hey, we've just built up a reference to a range using 2 individual cells as a starting and an ending place for that range, and that gives me A5 to J5. That looks pretty good. But if you'll notice the syntax that I cut out of there, it's saying from some initial cell, and the macro recorder said, hey, whatever was selected. Let me go ahead and pull my cell row 5, column 1 as a starting point. And because I'm not specifying the sheet that I want this to be on, let me come over and look at I'm going to activate my data set, because this is going to refer to the data based on how the contiguous data happens to be on this particular sheet. So what I'm saying is, what cell would we be referring to if we were on row 5, column 1, and we hit Control right arrow? What cell would that refer to? Well, I'm looking at that cell right now. It's right here. It's CE5. So if I run that, it's going to tell me, oh, that's CE5. So if you were on row 5, column 1, and you did Control right arrow, that would put you on CE5. By the way, the reason it's called end here is because back in the early days of Excel, before the invention of the control key, wait, have we been using Excel longer than the control key has been around? Probably not really. But before we could use the control key to like select that range based on contiguous data, it was a 2 keystroke sequence. Let me just show it to you. It still works. I'll come here on this A5, and I'm going to tap the end key on my keyboard. I'm going to strike it separately. In fact, when I do that, you'll watch right down here in the bottom left-hand corner, it's going to say, oh, we're in a special mode. We're now in end mode. And so now if I hit end and then right arrow, it does the same thing as Control right arrow would do. If I'm end and hit down arrow, it does the same thing as Control down arrow would do. So like that keystroke using the key, the end key, is where this got its name, where this method got its name. And so because this version of the range method takes 2 cells, I'm going to say, great, start here in cell, whatever row I'm on, column 1, and go from that same cell all the way to the right, just using the contiguous data. And so that should give me back that same multi-cell range, A5 to CE5. So let me go ahead and integrate this then into the code that I'm trying to build here. So back to module 1. And I'm ready to try to copy those values. I'm going to paste that little working cell that I had here, but now I want to make sure that I'm talking about the right sheet here. So I'm going to try to copy the sheet off the data range. And this sheet, called data set over here on the tab, has an object name of data. So I'll just refer to it by its object name. So I'll say, actually, I will say that inside. I don't put it on the outside range, I put it on the inside ones. So here I will say data.cells. We'll leave the 5 for now. It's going to start in that cell and end in this one, data.cells. And ultimately, when we've identified that cell, we're going to want to copy it. Is that what my code did? Yeah, it selected it, and then it said copy the selection. Okay, so now the only thing is, I got to get off of 5 here and have that be dynamic. So how am I going to know which row to copy the data from? I've got this variable here, row, but what does that row tell me? What do I have when I put a value into row? What value am I putting there? Go ahead. Yeah, it's just whatever was chosen from that dropdown. And so when I choose Baldwin, remember that that's going to be from this county names. When I choose Baldwin, that's going to be row number 4. Which row do I need to pull the data from for Baldwin County? County names, that's 1003 is the number. So when that row is 4, this is 5. Is it always going to be just one off, or is that a coincidence that they're so close? It's always going to be one off. Why? Because this data is in the same order, but it's one off because this data has a header that the county names doesn't have. So I could do a couple of things. I could find the value here. That way, if someone sorts this differently, it would still pull the right data. Or I could just assume that it's going to be the next row down from where I found the county name. Which way do you want to do it? You want to find it, or you just want to assume? Assuming is pretty simple because it's just row plus 1. I'm just going to do that for now. Maybe we'll come back and change that. So instead of looking at hard coding this to row 5, we'll look at row plus 1. That will copy the data. Now I'm ready just to paste it. I think I want to paste it in B3. So my worksheet, my compare worksheet dot, let's see. Yeah, let's look at a different, there's kind of yet another way to refer to the cell. So let's look at S dot columns. COLUMNS. And column, I'm trying to put this in B3, so I'm talking about column number 2. And unfortunately, you can't put columns B the way you can use the letter in the cells method. It has to be a number here. Okay, so that refers to that whole column. And now I could say, you know what? I want the 3rd cell in that column. So I could just say cells 3. Because cells now is going to say you want the 3rd cell in this range. And that range is the whole of column 2 on my compare sheet. So I'm talking about this whole one. And so that expression, columns 2, cells 3, refers to that cell right there. Counts the same way in that range as it does on the whole worksheet. It counts across, but it's only one column. So it counts 1, and then it counts 2 going across. There's only 1 to go for. And so it's like it counts down, even though it really is counting across just one column to deal with. And so that's going to refer to the cell that I want to paste this in. Let's go take a look at what the paste statement looked like. It's like paste special. I'm just going to copy the rest of this. And I'm not sure that we've talked about why we have to copy both those lines. Let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll take a look at it, and we'll simplify it. So that I'm going to say dot paste special. And that the macro recorder, when it gets a line that's too long, it says, you know what, I want to break this onto 2 different lines. And that's what that underscore does. So if I have a space underscore at the end of a line in VBA, it's saying, hey, this statement is continued on the next line. A lot of other languages say, you know what, we're going to require you to tell me when the statement is over by putting a semicolon at the end of the statement or something. Here in VBA, we assume that a statement goes on to 1 line. If you want a statement to go on to 2 lines, you got to tell me, continue this statement on the next line. And that's what the underscore does. It's got to be preceded by a space. I guess technically it's a space underscore. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of bring that up, and then we can take a look at what it's saying here. So we're calling the paste special method, and we're giving it paste. So it's got a parameter called paste, and we're telling it paste all. So XL paste all is just a constant. It's like a variable that's predefined. And that's -4104. It would be exactly the same if I put in -4104. So paste all. What's it going to paste? That mean when it says paste all, what does it mean? I don't know. It's not just the values. If there's formulas there, it would bring the formulas. I don't know if that's saying anything about the formatting or not. I'm just not sure. Well, there's no formulas involved here. It's all data. So I don't think I have to tell it paste all. I'm going to get rid of paste all. Operation, Excel none. This was so amazing to me when I found out you could paste with an operation. Do you know what this is even talking about? Like one of the things you can do with paste special, so you can say, I've got all these numbers. I've got this vector of numbers here. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it like onto another vector of numbers. And instead of replacing it, I can tell it to like multiply those two together. Like take the value that's getting pasted in and instead of replacing, like do a mathematical operation to the cell that's already there. Multiply it by the corresponding cell there or add it onto it. I can't imagine ever wanting to do that. But apparently somebody wanted to do it badly enough that they built that functionality into Excel. I have never used it. But that's what it's saying here. What do you want to do? Do you want to add or multiply or divide by those? And so none is going to be the default there. So I don't think I need to do that either. Same thing with here. Skip blanks. There's no blanks in this data. Transpose true. That's the one I need to leave. And so now we should be referring to that whole range and copying it. And then finding the cell we want to paste it into with a paste transpose. I like it. I am going to save my code, Control S, because anytime I'm about to paste a block of data somewhere else, I might paste it. I could paste it in the wrong place. I'd like to be able to recover at this point when I check this. I'm going to save the code, and if things go wrong, I can always recover it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this data out. Let me choose a different one. We'll choose Bibb, Alabama. Oh, it looks like it did it just right. 107. Is that Bibb? I don't know. 107 is Bibb. You just check and make sure the data looks like the right data. So I've got 21,629, 107, 21,629. Oh yeah, it's actually still has it copied as the one that got copied. Delightful. I'm on my compare sheet. I'm going to put my compare sheet as my first sheet. Well, hey, that's pretty good. Now, at least I can choose a particular county. Why don't we go ahead and choose Utah County? Wyoming, Wisconsin, QRSTUVW. Wow, Utah's not that close to the end. I thought it was like close to the end. There we go. Utah State, Utah County. There we are, Utah County. So let's broaden the numbers for Utah County. So at least now, I mean, at this point, we've already made this a lot more useful for looking at a particular county because I can say, choose the county, and now I can see like what all those numbers line up to. I don't have to go, what was SEX 208, whatever that was. I can see it right here. But now what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it so that if I select another one, it'll show both counties. It'll just give me the data for the next county in there. What am I going to have to do to make that happen? I'm looking at my code right here. Ooh, what's going to be what's my challenge here to be able to bring that data in? All right, where do I actually deal with the data? Maybe I should put some comments in my code here. So this is putting in the state. I'm getting on caps lock a lot today. This is putting the county name. And this is bringing in the data values. What do I have to change to be able to, instead of overwriting this data, to be able to bring in another county now and show the data next to it? Anyone want to take a stab at telling me just one thing I need to do to change? Go ahead. Oh, so we might need a loop. There's a couple things we might use a loop for. I think when I used to this example, I would use a loop to kind of go and bring the values in, but paste transpose is so easy that we did that. Creating a loop is probably not, because I want this code to execute each time I select a new state. So I'll select a new state and then bring in one set of data. So maybe not a loop. Go ahead. Ah. Okay, so what you're saying is that, listen, you're kind of figuring out, you've got everything here hard coded to look in column B. You're writing into column B here. You're going to column B here. You're doing in, where's the paste? You're pasting into column 2. And those 3 things are all talking about column B. And so we need to make that into a variable because we want the next data to come in right here. And that would work. But there's a much simpler shortcut to do it. This whole thing right here is coded to work to put the data into column B. So instead of making it so it kind of moves over, what's my other alternative? Just move the data that's in column B over. So just before I do all this pasting stuff, let's just make room there. So here's another way to refer to that whole column. Kind of a roundabout way to do it, but let me just say S dot, and I'm going to get to the particular cell in that sheet. So that will be, I'll just do it this way, B1. So from a reference to a particular cell, I can kind of bump up to its whole column by using the entire column method. entire column. Of course, I could refer to this just as s.columns2, the way I referred to it here. But here I'm saying, hey, let me talk about a particular cell, and then from that cell, get to its entire column. And then from there, I'm just going to insert. If I wasn't sure, like the statement that would insert a column, I could just record myself doing it, and I'd find out, it's just .insert to insert that column. And so make room for data. So now I'll choose Wasatch County. And it's done it just right, except that when you insert a column, it takes the width of that column from whatever cell is to the left of it. And so it's going to give me like more width than I want here. So I would really like to just kind of shrink that down. I'm just going to record myself doing it. Record a macro called macro2, and I'm going to double click the right-hand column here to make that fit itself down and stop recording. I'll go to take a look at that. Oh, it's just called autofit. So, and there's another way to refer to a particular column. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So after I plug the data values in there, I'm just going to go ahead and call this. Now, the truth is, I think this is a little overkill because I think this is a reference to the whole column. So I'm just going to see if I can get rid of the entire column and see if that works by itself. I'm not entirely positive it will. Let's just give it a shot and see what happens. We'll bring in another one. Yeah, looks like that did it just fine. There's the whole state of Vermont, Bennington County, Vermont, Essex County, Vermont. Whew. All right. Questions? What else should we do to make this useful for us? I think one thing that would be useful is if we had a way to clear this off. Now, it turns out clearing this data isn't that bad, right? Select the columns, hit the delete key, and you've cleared it. But let's go ahead and give ourselves a button to do the clearing as well. So I'm going to make another sub procedure here called clear data. and debug print clearing data. Now, in the same way that we put the drop down here to be able to invoke code when the user selected a particular one, you go ahead and I'll just hold the control key down when I click on this. That will select it instead of actually choosing it. And I did not mean to copy that. Once I have it selected, I'll just drag it to the side. And because I think I want the clear button to be to the right of it. So I'll use the clear button to cover over that number. So I'll come to my developer tab on my little insert, my little tool drop down here. I'm going to choose the very first tool. That's going to be a command button. So I'll select that button and then click and drag to draw the button on screen. Now this one is saying, you're making a button. You probably want to assign a macro. So it prompts us what macro to assign straight away. I'm going to assign clear data to it. And then I'll just put on the label, I'll say clear. And then maybe move that button so that it goes right up and right at the top of the sheet. So now when I run that, it's, oh, it would help if I spelled that right, D-E-B-U-G. We can see that it's running that code because it's right now it's just printing clear data to the immediate window. Ooh, how do we want to clear the data? Take a look at a couple of different ways to clear this data. Now, we've seen how to find the contiguous set of data using this AND method. I'm going to show you a couple of different variations on this. So the data that we're going to clear is going to start in B1. So let me just go ahead and build a multi-cell range. So, and this one is going to be responding when the user clicks on the clear button. This is going to have to be the active sheet. So I'm just going to work with, this code is going to assume we're talking about the active sheet. So let's make a multi-cell range. And so this is going to take two arguments, first cell and a second cell. Once we've got that, we're just going to say we want to clear that. So there's a method called clear, which will clear both the contents of the cell and any formatting that's in that cell. Now this is going to start right here on cell B1. And just another way to look at cell B1. So we'll get to a particular row number. Oh, actually, let's just do this one with cells 2. Because that's going to be the second cell, starting with A1, counting across. So that's where it's going to start. And now I want to find that, from there, I want to find the very bottom cell. Like what cell do we get to if we go down here? Now it turns out that in this data, there are no blanks. There are absolutely no blanks in any of this data. But if I did have blanks in the data, using control down would be dangerous because if there was a blank cell, it would stop there. Because control down only works through the set of contiguous data. You hit a blank cell, that's when it stops. So instead of going from that cell down, I'm going to come from this cell, the very last cell in that column, and I'm going to come up. Control up arrow. That's going to identify this cell at the very end based not on is there contiguous data to it, but is there no data after it. And so to get to the very last cell, here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to say cells. And ultimately what I want in here is column 2 and row number 1.04 million. I don't know what it is. Like that's the cell number that I'm after. But instead of hard coding that in, I'm just going to ask Excel to tell me what's that number. And I can do it this way, rows.count. So rows.count will just tell me how many rows there are on the active sheet. And it's not how many rows of data there are, it's like how many rows there are on that sheet. Well, every worksheet has the same number of rows, unless I'm dealing with an older version of Excel. Like if I'm using an Excel, what is it called? Excel. If I'm using an XLS file, have you ever worked with an XLS file? Yeah, XLS file is the version prior to 2007. It only has 255 columns and like 32,000 rows. So it'd be a different number of rows. So I'm going to say, listen, and who knows, but we might get another version of Excel that has more rows on the worksheet now. So instead of hard coding that value, I'm just going to plug in there whatever the last row is. We're clearing the data. We're starting here. Rows.count. Oh, it's already there. So starting at the very last row, column number 2. From there, I'm going to call the end method. And I'm going to come up. If I wasn't sure how to do that, of course, I could record myself doing it, and I would see, oh, you put the variable, you put the constant XL up in there, and that tells it to come up. And so that will then be, that will get me to the last cell. It'll give me the, yeah, that will be that cell. That will be that cell right there. I don't want to clear that cell. I don't want that to be the ending cell that I'm dealing with. From there, what do I want to do? Like from that cell, I want to do like a control right arrow to get to the end of my contiguous data. And so this can, like these can get kind of long, but this expression right here refers to the very last cell in the column. From there, I'm going to come up until I hit data. That's what this refers to. And from there, I'm going to go to the right until I'm out of data. And so there I will say dot end END XL2 right. So now I've got a multi-cell range. Starts with range. And this closing parenthesis right there is the end of it. Inside, I've got 2 arguments. Here's one argument, gets me to a particular cell. How do I find that cell? I'm going to go to the very bottom of column 2, come up until I hit data, and then go to the right as long as I have data. And that will be referring to that particular cell. If I was just to go and print like the address of that cell, it should be G85. So that will give me the ending cell. It's going to start in the second cell of my whole worksheet, and then that will identify that range, and then that will clear it off. So now when I click on that button, it should clear that data off. One way to clear the data. Show me how comfortable you are with that way to clear the data, 0 to 5. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Excellent. All right, let me show you a different way to get at that same thing. I'm going to comment this one out. And from here, yeah, I think this will work. Let me just look at A1. Dot current region. A1.current region dot address. Oh, that's because it's going by the set of contiguous data. And from A1, let me go ahead and put some data in here. So now if I look at the current region from A1, it's going to say, what's the contiguous data starting from A1? Well, it's like, this is the same as pressing control star. Is that right? Yeah, control star on your keyboard will select the contiguous data from wherever you are. And in VBA lingo, that's called the current region. Now, I certainly don't want to delete the current region, because why? I don't want to lose these. So what I can do is once I've got that region, I can offset it. Current region dot offset, and how many rows and columns I want to offset. How many rows I want to offset? 0. How many columns I want to offset? 1. And so that's B1 to C85. So it takes the same shape of the region that was defined just by getting the current region, and it shifted it over by 1. So yeah, it's going to clear out this blank column too, but that's going to be a little bit easier way of getting to it. So now I can come here and say A1 current region offset 1 column. And instead of asking for the address, I want to clear it. So this should be another way to clear off that data. There's another way. And of course, there's many other ways. But here's this can be a really handy reference to a particular range. It's called used range. Used range.address. Used range. You might have to tell it the sheet that you're on. Yeah. So used range, it's not smart enough to figure out if you just use it by itself. It's got to be on a particular sheet. But what the used range, so I've got to tell it some sheet. I got to give it some sheet to start with. The used range method is going to give me the address of the smallest rectangle that bounds the data that's on the sheet, all the data on the sheet. And so because this data right now starts in A1 and goes down to A85, let me go ahead and put some more counties in here. So now it should end in column D. I'll look at my used range, and it's A1 to D85. So it's saying, you've got the whole sheet, but just what's the smallest rectangle that actually holds the data that's on this worksheet? So yet another way to do that, instead of current region offset, would be active sheet dot used range offset and clear. So different ways to get at the same block of data on this sheet, but of course, depending on what other data might be on the sheet, we would refer to different particular ranges. All right. Any questions? I think this will be a good place to end this example. We're going to pick this example up once we get to dealing with charts, because the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to make this say, you know what, let's pull in a few of these counties. We're doing some study on some kind of counties in Virginia. And I'd like to be able to say, go ahead and chart this data and have it automatically bring a chart in here. And then chart this data and bring it in the next chart, have it labeled it appropriately and size it nicely. And so we're going to pick up this example again once we get to working with charts. But I think that's enough for today. So thanks for coming. We'll see you on Wednesday. Class dismissed. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I think we're not finished. I didn't vote for it.
Hey, Colleen, I'm between classes right now, so I can talk, but I can't look on the computer.